People love music. It's this huge thing, but musicians and music workers like aren't rewarded for their contribution. Like, can you imagine if like musicians, for example, like didn't have to live in poverty and they were rewarded by, getting basic income or something like that, or even being paid properly for gigs? It's really tough to make money now, especially with how things have gone. So combined with contributing so much, but like being given back so little, it's like almost like not a real job yet. What are you giving back to the world? It's so much, and it's so much energy that you're giving off. And then you're in this space where these mental health issues, addictions, just chaos, it's all romanticized, right?
Yeah.
While your job is not recognized as being a real job. And like with the advent of like social media and everyone having phones, you're also like, especially female identifying musicians, and you're expected to also now be perfect.
This is the Conscious Economics Podcast, and I'm your host, Rhiannon Roseland. This is the place where we explore people, planet, profit, and art through the lens of the new economy. If you're interested in changing yourself, getting more creative, or changing the system at large, then this is the podcast for you. Tune in every other week as we explore these topics with amazing guests. We'll go deep, we'll go heart-centered and soul-felt as we go into how we change ourselves and change the world. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Conscious Economics Podcast. I am your host, Rhiannon Roseland. Happy New Year. 2023 is here, and my oh my, in my reflection over the last couple of weeks of 2022, it was such a huge, huge year for all of us, really, but for me personally, majorly. So many major changes in my life for the good, some really hard, some really heartbreaking. Lost my mom at the end of last year. So I'm just rolling into this season really thinking about how we can protect our hearts as things are, continuing to amplify on the planet, the economy being all over the map. And I just think it's so important for us now more than ever to have conversations like we have here on the show. And today's episode is, I think, exactly what we need. I was so blown away and honored to sit down with today's guest, Anna Ruddick. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Anna for those of you that have not heard of her. She's been a working musician for well over a decade, and I'm going to get into some of that work. But today she joins the podcast as a passionate advocate for the financial and emotional well-being of the Canadian music industry workers. So any workers within the Canadian music industry. And she's really serving that passion in her role at the Unison Fund. Unison Fund is Canada's music charity, and she has been leading there as a manager of industry relations. And we get into that during the conversation of what the organization really does and how she got there and why it's such important work. But I do want to talk a little bit about her unbelievable music career that she still continues to pursue in light of her incredible social work that she does through Unison Fund in supporting artists and working musicians. And so, as you know, the fact that she's doing this work really does classify her as a conscious economy leader and Unison Fund as a conscious economy organization. So we're so excited to have her. So Anna is a graduate of McGill University's Jazz Performance Program. And then she did a postgraduate in arts administration and cultural management at Humber College. But I want to really talk about the amazing work that she's done as a bassist, as a female bassist in Canada. She's one of the most sought after musicians in the country. So she has toured with some of the most notable Canadian and international artists. So on tour as a bassist with City and Colour, Fifi Dobson, Aaron Costello, Ian Burlton's quartet, Future Now. She is just so freaking cool. And I love how heart-centered she is. She talks really candidly about what it's been like for her to be a woman bass player, in the industry and a mom and, navigating what it really feels like to be a rock star on the road. And I know so many of us, we kind of glamorize some of that, but she talks about some of the challenges of that and what's really led her to this work of wanting to support not only herself, but all artists and Canadian music workers through her role at Unison Fund. So I am so excited for you to listen to this episode and really meet Anna. It was my first time meeting her here during this conversation, and I just know that we are going to be friends for a long, long time. So it's pretty exciting when that happens. Anyways, enjoy Anna Ruddick. Hi, Anna. I'm so excited to meet you. I've heard so many things about you, and Jackie just is raving about you. And of course, Unison as an organization, I feel such an alignment with everything that you all are doing. So this is just such a pleasure to end off my year in having this conversation with you. Thanks for being here.
You're so welcome. And it's really nice to meet you too. I had a really great time talking to Jackie the other day for maybe 3 hours.
That's amazing.
We had so many, we were just jumping all over every single aspect of the sort of alignment between our two organizations and just all the things that we agree on and all these things that we both want to do in the future.
I love it. Yeah. Well, and I think that, now it's ever more important with everything that we've come through and where we're headed. Yeah. And so when we find those aligned partners and allies, it's just so important to figure out ways to work together. And that's a big part of the conscious economy principle. Like, we really believe that we should not be working in silos towards the same good goals, that we should try to combine those resources and work together. So with all of that said, for our listeners who are just tuning in, I'd love if you could take us on the journey of your life. I know that sounds like a big question, but you've just done so many incredible, cool things as a musician, as a mom, and now in your role at Unison. And so I'd love to just hear like the Coles notes of who are you at your core essence, and how did you land in this moment where we're having this talk right now?
It's a difficult question, actually. Who I am in my core. I think anyone who works in the arts would have a difficult time answering that in a sincere way. It's really hard to sort of separate who am I at my core to what do I present to the world as an artist or as a musician or as now somebody that works in the industry side of things. But I guess I'm a person who figured out at a pretty young age, I guess, that I tended to not fit in anywhere in the circumstances in which I grew up. I guess I grew up in a small town. If we're going to get down to the beginnings of things, I had parents that were from abroad. So, it was just, I grew up in this environment that was like a little bit different than maybe some of my peers. I grew up and still am neurodivergent. So, people that's a very common theme amongst musicians and artists. I was very creative, very hyper-focused on the creative aspects of my mind and my goals, but, I had a difficult time maybe with all of the other components that go into growing up, like socially and having to jump through all of these other educational hoops. But, we talk about the negative sides of something like ADHD, where, there's all these obstacles, but there's also all of these really positive things about it. And that focus and that resilience and that creativity made it really easy for me to just kind of put the blinders on and focus on what I wanted to do, which ended up being music. I had this just natural draw to it. I remember being and it didn't start very early with playing the bass. I was about 16. I heard this Joni Mitchell live record called Shadows and Light, and I thought it was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. It was this guy, Jaco Pastorius, playing bass, and I'm like, that instrument is the most incredible thing I've ever heard. And I already played it a bit, but I'm like, I have to be able to play really well and make this a career for myself. So I just went into it, and it was like, I mentioned a sort of kind of different way that my brain works, because one of the things that people often ask me about my career is like, how did you go into this career that is not very like accepting sometimes of females? There's a lot of men do this job. I don't know how to like explain this in a way that sounds like politically correct, but it's very male dominated, I guess.
It is. Yeah.
But I don't know if it was like the way that I think, and that like that sort of resilience that I have always had, which is I guess the thing I like most about myself. I didn't really get affected by that in the same way. I just really thought it was about, you have to do the work and you have to focus. And, I knew that I was getting into it a little bit later than other people because I hadn't been playing at the time. I was focusing on learning jazz. I hadn't been doing it for very long, but I do have an academic mind. So I just sort of focused on it in that way and like took out all the pieces the expectations and just learned how to do this job. And then it went on to playing. I lived in Montreal. I did my undergrad at McGill, and I started playing with some bands that were, playing country and pop and rock and that kind of thing. And I was in a band that got signed to a label, and we worked with a producer on our first record. And he sort of gave me this opportunity to realize that I was good at recording, being a recording musician, a session player. And that became the focus. That became, I think, the most happy I've ever been is when I'm in the studio. I don't like being on stage as much, but I love that the creativity behind creating a landscape for somebody's songs. I feel like I'm getting off track.
No, I'm so interested, and I'm honestly I'm sitting in the energy that you're giving out and how you're talking about this, and it like, even just hearing about the Joni Mitchell album, like I'm kind of want to cry a little. Like it's just so special. And I can tell it just comes from your core. So you are telling me who you are at your core.
I don't think that I've ever spoken about it in this much detail. And it's funny talking to you about this. I don't know how to explain sometimes my motivations in terms of my music career to somebody that is not a musician, that like is a music appreciator. So I'm like, I feel like I don't want to talk about these like technical things, but like
no, I'm interested, and I am a musician myself as well. But like you, from a very early age, like everything that you're saying really resonates with me. And for me, I was a singer-songwriter from like writing my first song since a little child, like 6 and 5 years old, but I gave my music up. And, that's a story for another time. But to hear you knowing this and then sticking to it and then finding the part that really served you, I think this is really empowering for everyone that's listening. And it's conscious economics. So like, we're not going to be linear here, and we're probably might cry and like, it's all fine, or I'll cry because I don't talk about it really too publicly. And I've only just like last year, I picked up my guitar again and I wrote like 75 songs last year, and I'm just back in the studio. Yeah. Wow. So it just kind of poured out of me because I had I put the cork in it for quite a few years. And as you know, if you are a born creative and a born musician, that can actually make you sick. And so there were parts of my life it's like I was taking all of that energy, and I've got a lot of energy, and who knows what spectrum of things I'm actually on. I don't classically know, but I don't operate in a normal linear way myself. So it's just everything you're saying resonates. And so to get back to you, because I think that's what we're here for right now, I want to know, so you've become just like an unbelievable session musician, and you've done so much with so many incredible acts. And I've talked about all of that in the intro. How did you and why did you decide to take on this role at Unison, and where did that happen and why? Like what's your personal purpose for that? Because you don't have to do that.
No.
So that is really something that like intrigues me.
I feel so much more comfortable now knowing that we are the same in a way of having the experience with music and how much it can make you sick. I think in some ways it wasn't that for me that, the pandemic happened, which gave me an opportunity to go back to school. Decided that I would go back to school because I wanted to work at Unison. It was very much a strategic plan. I've always been strategic. It's the only sort of way to get through.
Yeah.
doing what we do. But it wasn't because of the pandemic. Sometimes that's an easy story to tell because I literally went to school at Humber and did like a postgrad certificate in arts administration and cultural management. And it was in 2020. It was in the middle of the pandemic. It was online. It was very convenient to do it that way because my daughter was really young. But the reason I did that is because I'd been on tour and it didn't feel right anymore. Being in that space, that was never where I thrived. It's always been the studio for me, as I explained to you.
Yes.
It's like, I guess I always said I'm not a creator, I'm a technician, right? Because I'm a session player, I go in and I, add bass to people's music. But like in this conversation, I'm sort of realizing, I guess that creative aspect of it is what I do like about the studio. When I tour, I'm playing somebody else's music in a consistent fashion. That is a technical role, like every night. But being on the road was difficult for me mentally.
100%.
It's usually with people that I don't really know. A lot of people, it was difficult for me to be in that space. And I was doing it a lot. I was leaving my daughter at home. I mean, we'll probably talk about the parenting piece later, but it created this terrible, I don't want to say terrible because it's just one of those things that we go through as mothers, especially as mothers who work the way that we do full time. I had a pretty bad imposter syndrome about motherhood because I was not there. She walked and I wasn't there. She started talking. She grew an inch while I was away, all that kind of stuff. And I felt extremely removed from that. And at the time I was a single parent too. So, I'm like, my mom and dad are raising my kid half of the time. And I know that that's normal and that the larger extended family helping with child rearing is normal and healthy. But the society I was looking at through the lens of my being a parent was telling me that was not true. So I felt very, very, I guess I just lost my focus a lot on certain things that were important. And I found that getting off the road and then being in the pandemic, which was a terrible thing, but it's one of those things that for some of us that really needed to make a change, it was helpful to not have the option of doing anything but being at home.
100%. Again, everything you're saying, I mean, I'm sure you can see because our listeners are just listening, but I'm looking at you and, my eyes keep welling up because just the way you put that you had imposter syndrome around motherhood. I had that so bad. Like I had that so bad. And I was also running. Totally. Like I was running a national organization, 100 events a year. I was gone always. And I was relying on everybody around me. And I just there was such a deep guilt, but then there was also this feeling of but I love what I'm doing and I have to do this and I'm supporting my life and all of these things. And the pandemic for me, the best thing that happened during the pandemic was, I sold the business that was taking me away from my babies. And I became a better
Congratulations,
mom.
by the way, that you did that.
Thank you so much.
I heard that story and I was like, wow, you're so badass.
I just was like, I want to be a better mom. And it's not that I wasn't a loving mom, because of course we love our children and our babies, but we are dealing with what is the reality of the expectation on us as women in society. And it just, everything that you're saying is really deep. So it shows me the pathway then that you understood that it's not just you going through this, that many musicians and many people in the arts and in the live space in particular are having these different things that are coming up that can be quite challenging to our psyche, to our heart, to our soul, to just our essence of what we want. And is that part of what drew you to Unison?
Well, there's that, the drawing, being drawn into an alternative career was about parenting, but it was also about getting older, finding love. I got into a really happy relationship with somebody that was helping me raise my daughter. And we wanted to have another kid. And I was for the first time not focusing on everything about me had to do with what I was doing career wise. I had this happy home. I didn't need to be in public or be proving anything or have we tie ourselves so much to our career. And I wanted to mention it, not just in the space of the arts and in music. I think it's I think women in general do this, especially mothers, have something to prove and have something to separate from their home life. And for me, everything just kind of being in one space and being at home and just being with my family and that being enough. it gave me like the sort of confidence to just like admit to myself that I wanted to do something else. I wanted a steady paycheck. I needed a steady paycheck that would allow me to continue playing music, because it's just simply something that I won't give up. But I saw how the economy was going, and even pre-pandemic, I needed more. And I recognized through my own struggles with this stuff. And I mean, I've had so much success at being a, hired musician, bass player person. That's a difficult thing to do. And I'm proud of what I've done and how much I've been able to focus, even with all the issues I've had along the way. But I really was drawn to Unison. I knew what it was. I'd never, taken money from them or anything like that, luckily. But I knew what it was, and I loved the idea of it, and I wanted to be involved in it. It's just this thing, sort of the same thing that drew me to wanting to play the bass. Like, I really want to play this instrument. I don't know why. I just need to. It's like, it was the same thing. I'm like, I need to work for Unison. I love what this organization is doing. So I wrote an essay about Unison in my program, and I sent it to my boss and asked if I could be an intern. And, she was like so lovely and receptive to my crazy phone call that I made to her. And I started there, and
I love it. I love that you just like know what you want and you just go after it. And that resonates with me too. I do the exact same thing. Like, there's not one thing that I've really wanted that I haven't gone after, it doesn't always work out exactly the way you expect it to, but there's always worth a try and a shot. The Conscious Economics Podcast is brought to you by CPP Investments, manager of the Canada Pension Plan Fund. Canadians can be confident in the fund's sustainability. CPP Investments has earned more than $300 billion in the last 10 years and has more than $500 billion invested around the world. The Canada Pension Plan is set to provide a retirement income foundation for generations to come. To learn more, visit cppinvestments.com. Can you just describe, before we get a little deeper into it, for those that are listening, in your own words, what Unison is really all about? Because I've introed you, but just I want to hear from you because you're within the organism. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to describe it from my own perspective as best I can, because I mean, we can all go online and read about what Unison does. We support musicians basically both financially and with other issues that they might have, whether it be mental health or they need counseling for something else, legal issues. We just try to provide as many resources as possible for the music community. Since I've been at Unison, obviously there has been a huge focus on financial assistance, because I started with Unison during like the pandemic, like the lockdown 2020. They put all their resources into just helping people financially. People would just apply and we would just give out as many payments as possible. During the pandemic, Unison received the government funding for the first time as a charity that had never happened before. And it was so nice to be part of this organization at a time when I was able to see how the government recognized that musicians and artists are struggling. And we were able to get a heritage fund this year. And it's amazing what Unison does, and like what everybody on the team does. Just, they love music, they love musicians, they love music workers, and they just want to help and like put everything that they can into it. They're really wonderful people. And as a musician on staff, I cannot tell you how much I respect like what they're doing and how honored I am to be a part of it and to be able to help from my perspective. And I just hope that we can continue growing and helping even more. There's the financial assistance program, but there's also a mental health and wellness assistance program provided by LifeWorks, which is sponsored by RBC. And our members can call a number, basically get triaged to a therapist or social worker or whoever is best suited for their needs at that time. I've actually used the service before. I saw a family therapist, I spoke on the phone to a family therapist, and it was incredible. Like, I'm not like a therapy person. I always have a hard time expressing myself properly. I liked that it was on the phone. I liked that it was like a family therapist. I was basically going through like having trouble with custody, of my child, having trouble with that piece where my child is like not with me for 3 days a week. I'm struggling emotionally with it. Like that imposter syndrome, that feeling like I'm not a real mother, all of that. And I called LifeWorks and I spoke to this woman who's a family therapist, and she recognized that I needed tools. Like I didn't need to like talk about how I feel about the
Yeah.
situation. Like we all know how I feel about the situation,
Yeah.
but she provided me with this like incredible just base of tools to like cope with the various aspects of this in a healthy way with my
Yeah.
child,
Yeah.
etc. And it was really, really amazing. And I cannot recommend it enough. And like we don't, as music workers, we don't really have the disposable funds to pay for this kind of thing. And it's
Mm-hmm.
so amazing that Unison has this because it really helped me. And I always tell the story to
I
people that are
love
curious
it.
about it
I love
because
it so much. And thank you for being so open about that. And as someone who, again, I mean, I struggled when I went through my divorce and my
yeah.
children are now not with me for a portion of the time. I definitely know that feeling and so many others. And I've been very public about, my own, like I've been sober for 5 years and I'm super, super proud of that. And I've had just so many ups and downs, and people look at the veneer of a successful career, whether you're a
Yeah.
musician or whatever it is. And there's all these assumptions that are made about who we are. And I think that what I've learned the most in speaking to people and being in my position, for the last 14 years at the Economic Club was that even like, the top CEOs of the world or the top diplomats, like we're all human beings and we're all going through these various different things. And I think that's the reckoning moment that we're in now. And it's so like my heart swells so deeply at the fact that we can actually have this conversation right now and feel empowered by having it and not, be worried about the stigma of what that could mean. And even just a few years ago before the pandemic, like I remember getting up and sharing some of my story publicly at the Economic Club at one of our most like Bay Street corporate events ever, just because I was like done with like pretending. And I was like, these are the real issues fueling our economy. And people were like jaw dropped and like just did not know what to do because we were just in such a different space. And while we've moved through in very intense collective trauma, that trauma and those like that friction point is how we grow, is how we evolve, is how we change. And I really think this is a conscious economy organization. You're a conscious economy leader. That's why we wanted to have this talk because, we have to be doing the work at this point with all that's going on in the world. We have to be doing the work to expand our conscious awareness of ourselves, our interplay with the economy, with nature, with creativity. It's all a part of it. So it's so interesting and like beautiful to hear your story. I want to talk to you a little bit more broadly about the unique struggle of musicians and artists, because like, again, half our audience are artists and musicians and half are not. We're very sort of like business meets art. And so for those that maybe don't understand, we all have a delicate balance that we have to kind of manage in, especially living in the West, and the pace of work and the expectation and the pressure. But there is a delicate balance, especially for touring musicians. I always think in terms of energetics. So I think of like being up on stage and having the adrenaline of that, and then having to come off that adrenaline. And I was not a touring musician, but I was a touring CEO of a national organization that was doing 100 shows a year. And I would be up in front of thousands of people multiple times a week and traveling and living out of a bag and all of the things. And I had a really difficult time. And that was where my alcohol issue really came in. It definitely is deep within my family as well, but I was using it to calm my own nerves back down.
100%.
Like I wasn't partying and like swinging off a chandelier. I was like privately using it to just come down a notch off of what was just pure adrenaline. So I know in terms of mental health, and financial health is so interrelated to mental health, that many musicians and artists have a delicate balance that they're trying to manage. And there's not always the tools traditionally available for folks. So can you talk a little bit like from your own experience, but also from what you know and see?
It's, I guess, like, I almost want to tie in the financial piece to the mental health piece and the whole thing about the touring and what you're describing as like a CEO on the road. It's exactly the same thing. And the drinking is exactly the same thing. It's motivated by the same thing. it's probably normalized in the same way in that corporate space too, from everything I've seen in movies and going to bars and happy hour. Musicians, music workers are just responsible for such a huge piece of the economy, right? Like music generates millions and millions of dollars to the GDP annually. Like it's tourism, it's like entertainment, it's everything. It's so necessary in the fabric of society. People love music. It's this huge thing, but like musicians and music workers like aren't rewarded for their contribution in the like we're like, can you imagine if like musicians, for example, like didn't have to live in poverty and they were rewarded by, getting basic income or something like that, or even being paid properly for gigs? It's really tough to make money now, especially with how things have gone. So combined with contributing so much, but like being given back so little, unless you're, part of the top percentage of people that are earning money from their songs and touring, doing big tours, people that I've worked for example. But the average musician is it's like almost like not a real job yet. What are you giving back to the world? It's so much, and it's so much energy that you're giving off. And then you're in this space where these mental health issues, addictions, just chaos, it's all romanticized, right?
Yeah.
While your job is not recognized as being a real job. And like with the advent of like social media and everyone having phones, you're also like, especially female identifying musicians, and you're expected to also now be perfect.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
And then not be compensated for it. I don't know. It's like, it's just a swirling
bananas
thing.
Is what it is. Like, it's
I don't
totally
know if
bananas.
I explained that well. Like, I'm just trying to sort of tie it all in.
Oh my gosh. No, you explained it so well. And I think it's, and each individual, I really want to recognize, like everyone who's listening, we all have our unique way that we're experiencing these different things. But I do think that it's just an unbelievable amount of pressure. The industry's changed so much, and this is something that, even at the Economic Club side, we were doing a lot of we were the first national business platform to have artists speaking on the podium about, the policy and legislation issues that were impacting them, and just how the industry has changed. And there's, again, it's a common narrative across the board within our economy of, the few percent growing and getting, wealthier and wealthier, and so many others, losing out in this game. And then there's also just the pressure of still acting like you're a rock star. So having to glamorize and look like it's all, I don't know, it's, when it's not. And that in and of itself, like having to live in a false sort of perception or putting out a false perception of self is so traumatizing. And I experienced that as well with like running this, very elite platform with the wealthiest and most powerful people in the world. And I was like, I grew up in poverty, and I was the first person in my family to even finish high school, let alone go to university. And now I'm sitting here like, what is going on? And I think, I talk so publicly about this. You're talking publicly about these things because we want people to understand that whoever you are and wherever you come from, like, you belong, and we all do. And I know that sounds so like cheesy or, whatever, but I really truly believe it. And when we find ourselves in places, or we find ourselves having to do things that aren't in our truth of what we really are, or who we are, or what we're putting out, rather than pushing past that, we have to stand up and do something about it. And that again brings me back to your work at Unison and what you're doing. And it's so incredible. Let's talk a little bit more about the finance piece. Obviously, we believe it's intertwined. Conscious economics is that intertwined piece. And we have a bunch of different programs like Mindfulness and Money, where we're really talking about finance, not from like the bricks and mortar budgeting and investing and this and that, although all of those things are important. But when we have subconsciously been told that we are going to be a struggling artist, we accept that. And when we've been
it's not a real job, that piece is just, that's
huge. Yeah. That,
It doesn't
and then
reflect reality.
also that if you're a creative, you're not meant to be good at business, or you're not meant to be good in finance or whatever. Like
Oh,
there's
100%. Yeah.
there's all of that. And
Yeah.
so you see so many artists almost, becoming avoidant with finance because it's like, well, I've been told that this is how it's going to be. This message has been perpetuated by everyone around me, including my paycheck perpetuates it because I'm not being valued. Like you said, a lot of people are trying to pay people in exposure when what they need is to be actually compensated financially for what they're putting out. So there's this real interesting collective subconscious program as an artist that we are really trying to tackle at Conscious Economics. And so I guess my question for you is, what do you think needs to change in the approach around money with creatives and artists?
I know people, I have colleagues that, are Juno award winning musicians that during the pandemic were comfortable for the first time in a long time knowing they were going to get served $2,000 a month because they knew they were going to be able to get groceries. Like that's like really fucked up. But that's the reality that we live in. Like that should not be positive, but it is very, very, very difficult to do this and make money doing it. There is that, we grow up, and I remember being a young person and, not being able to afford medication, and not like that makes you feel like you don't deserve health when you can't, like, you don't get the health benefits as an artist or a musician. You don't get, we don't have the access to these social services because we don't get paychecks. We're self-employed. You're not necessarily going to get a proper pension. You're not necessarily, like, if something happens to you where you can't work, like if I break my arm and I can't play the bass, what am I going to do? There's nothing in place. If I have a baby, I don't get mat leave. I get nothing, unless I've been paying into EI. Like, and musicians don't think to do things like that because they don't think like about the future and their finances because we've been programmed to avoid it. But it creates this, for me, it always created this situation where I just felt undeserving of like basic things. And that's like, I think that's probably sounds dramatic, but I do think that it would probably resonate with a lot of young musicians because we just are used to that struggle and that, I started working at Unison, and by that point I made a very good living, like for a musician, but like, I was getting a paycheck and, I had benefits for the first time. And like that feeling where you get to go pick up your ADHD medication that costs probably $350 a month normally. And like, it's covered in part because it's your health, your mental health, or anything, any of my kids' medication, taking my kids to the dentist regularly, all that kind of stuff. That's really expensive, really adds up. Having that covered by my work felt like I wanted to cry. I'm like, I can't believe how taken care of I feel. It was almost like too good to be true. It's this basic thing, I can afford all of those things as a musician, but like to have it, like to not have to budget stuff like that in because you're contributing to the economy. And like, I was also doing that before. I don't know how to, and I feel like I'm not being articulate, but it's really those things. That's kind of like why I was drawn to Unison, because it's kind of providing this like this social services piece to musicians and where they can feel like somebody cares about them and will help them if something goes wrong, because
100%.
it certainly isn't going to happen anywhere else. Right.
100%.
And it's a really beautiful thing that, and I really was really, really drawn to that. And it really, I think I want to be with that organization for a very long time and see how it grows, because it's just like, it's musicians and music workers deserve like, dignity in some ways.
100%.
I'm sorry to laugh. It's just, it sounds so silly, but it's really lacking. And I don't know what the solution is. It's funny we throw around this term of universal basic income because we just had universal basic income during the pandemic. But I just think something like that would be really, really helpful. I haven't done enough research about it, whether this exists in other places, but I do know that, something like a third of music workers gave up and went on to other work during the pandemic because it was just not worth it anymore. I think it's probably hard for like the big touring bands to find enough crew people to go on tour these days, let alone like pay for it because of the inflation and everything. I think the system is just very broken. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, but it absolutely does. And you're being so articulate about all of it. And I completely understand. And so when we talk about conscious economics, the philosophy and the order of how we talk about the pillars of a conscious economy are in a particular order for a reason. So the first one is people. And what we mean by that is the true well-being of people, like true mental, spiritual, physical well-being. Next is planet, and we talk about needing our environment to be healthy and needing to be in relation to our environment. The next one is around profit and this idea that we heal our relationship to profit, all the things that are unhealthy about it, but also make peace with being profitable or being able to call in these resources into our lives and know that we deserve them. And the last piece is art. And the reason why is because when we know that we've made it and we are in a conscious economy, it's measured by how our artists are treated. It's measured by how creativity is honored as the most sacred of all gifts that we have as beings, is how creativity comes through and how an artist is honored in a society. And that's really what I believe. Like, this comes from, you know, years and years of thinking about these issues and realizing that everything that you say is a microcosm for what's wrong with the full system. And then it trickles down into artists and musicians. It trickles down into folks that are, you know, on the front lines or are marginalized in other ways. And it's not that I know the exact answer either, but I know that in just even talking about these things and having an organization like Unison that is actually acting like a collective resource of insurance and, you know, financial well-being and mental well-being for artists and musicians, it's a huge step. And it's so important. I'm just really blown away by you and by the organization, like I do have to say. And so transitioning into, I think, the next piece, which is about this archetype that we think of when we think about a rock star or a musician or somebody that's on the road. And there's a pressure, I think, sometimes to fulfill that and fulfill that image of like, everything's fun, there's no issues, like we're just out there having a great time and building this, you know, incredible work and connecting with fans. But there are so many other aspects to people, and there are so many different types of people and families and mothers and whatever that are truly doing this work in a different way. Do you think there's a paradigm shift coming where people are starting to prioritize like, hey, let's have a non-alcoholic drink after, or like do a breath work after a show instead so we can bring our nervous systems back down? Like, are we going to get there, do you think? Or what?
I think that we're already there, just based on, and I think that the reason that that's happened is that, you know, I don't know if it's like everybody getting their Netflix documentary who's on the, like, and speaking about their mental health and speaking about their addiction struggles, and it's all very, very positive. But, you know, you're seeing tours being canceled because of mental health challenges, because touring is incredibly weird and strenuous. And if you're the star of the show, like, my God, the energy that you have to put forth every night. Like, I just have to stand back there and play the bass. I don't envy what they're doing. It's a big job. And if you're looking out and you look up at the top of the arena and there's like 17 rows of empty seats, like, you might be sweating, you know, like, why are those seats empty? Like, even small things like that. And then getting off stage and, like, it's like you said, I didn't think about it this way, but bringing down the energy, like, that's when the alcohol thing starts happening, or the drugs, or whatever the case may be. I think that this shift has already happened of just like, even watching, I don't know if it's a good example, but I was watching this like documentary about Demi Lovato's drug overdose, and she's speaking very candidly. I don't necessarily, there's things about watching that series that made me super uncomfortable in terms of the people around her and how they ended up on the other side of the whole thing. But like, for her to speak about this stuff so candidly, that was the positive takeaway. Because I mean, this is something that like so many musicians and artists have gone through. The amount of times we're reading now that somebody's passed away because of these, especially during the pandemic, there's a huge problem. And I do think people are talking about it, and there has been a shift, and there will continue to be a shift. I think it started out like people being super hyper honest. It started out, you know, with these social medias and documentaries and YouTube and all that stuff. It started out kind of toxic, and I don't know if this is the right way to frame it, because there was that piece where all this like glorified rock star shit it's all these super unhealthy things that are being romanticized, but then, now it's all on the screen and the phones are out and you also have to be perfect. It's a combination. Like that chaos while being completely flawless at the same time. Like, I don't know, like not everybody is Lady Gaga and can pull off the chaos and being perfect at the same time.
No, and Lady Gaga herself has struggled so deeply with mental health and all of it. So it's like, even the ones that look like they're doing it, I don't believe are.
Yeah, her documentary was also incredible. That was like,
huge.
I was going to mention that one too. It's just, but those things are important, no matter like what the negative sides of certain of these, like the Lovato piece, like there's very negative, weird things about that, but like there's also really positive things about that. People are having these conversations, but this is again at this macro level, like these big stars are talking about their struggles. What about like the average musician? What about mid-level artists? Like, there's just too much of this huge gap between the rich and the poor, I guess, in terms of the music industry. It's such a dumb way to say it, but like we do have to, there's this shift in like the popular space where the fans of these artists are now hearing them talk about mental health, addiction, blah blah blah, but like we have to bring that down to like the level of musician that I am, a working musician. Like there is absolutely no space for me to talk about addiction, mental health issues in the same way, and it be okay and accepted, and to garner sympathy from that. I'm not going to get sympathy from that.
No, and and you're
or help
you're right,
or whatever.
and you're being just very honest and candid, and I think that is why, coming back to a point you made earlier, that we are going to have to individually get the tools ourselves, and then we're going to have to apply those tools. Everybody deserves to have the tools. Everybody can benefit from the tools. I don't care who you are or how bad you think it is, or how, how messed up it feels. Tools and being able to get your mind under your own control, as opposed to it controlling you, is a huge part of it. And I think that we've been conditioned to think that all of these things are extremely complicated and that it takes wealth in order to even fix ourselves. But one of the things that I, again, want to, there are so many resources, including nature itself, our own breath, these things that will never cost anything, that can transform our lives. And I am like a living example of that in how I've approached my journey to self-love and healing and recovering, and realizing that I don't have to be everything to everyone, that I don't have to prove something to myself, never mind to everyone else. It was a desire and a drive to prove that I was worthy, because of a belief deep down that there was no possible way I was, and the lengths that you're willing to go in order to prove that, and a society and an economy that rewards you for showing up in this peak way all of the time. And any chance you slightly just dip down from it, it's like you're kicked in the stomach. And that is just, it's not going to ever be sustainable. And I think we are finally, like I said, we are in this reckoning moment right now. It's really, really, it's the most important time for us to step forward as leaders of organizations like the ones that we're leading, to do this work, to lay this new foundation. I believe that so deeply. I want to end off, because I'm so mindful. I could talk to you for 10 million hours, I feel.
I could definitely talk to you for 10 million hours too.
Yes.
So I hope we do this again.
We are for sure. And I just think that there's so much alignment with our goals of what we want to do and how we want to help people and help ourselves. And I think that that's another part of the healing process, is that when you are helping and you're being a part of the solution, that's also helping yourself. And the more that we can use our own personal challenges to then bring that wisdom into those that we're helping, that's again a full kind of conscious economy moment. I want to just end off with you telling us where folks can find the resources at Unison. If I'm somebody who is in need of support, what does that look like and where do I find it?
The easiest thing to do is just to go on our website, which is unisonfund.ca, and you have all your financial assistance resources there, counseling and health solutions, which is the LifeWorks program that I was talking about, and then a bunch of just other resources in terms of we have an organization there that does health insurance that you can pay into monthly for artists, and you can join that free as a Unison member. And yeah, just a wealth of resources that we have. And I just really just encourage everyone to sign up and register and apply and take what you need from us, because that's what it's there for. And anybody that's in a position, obviously, to donate to Unison, please do, because you're helping musicians and helping musicians be rewarded for their contribution and helping them when they need it the most, because there's so many times in our lives as musicians and music workers, as you know, where even something like, I can't work right now. I need to take a month off. My mental health is failing. I need to take a month off. I need to get off the drink and dry out and focus on myself and breathe and be at home. Like, I would love Unison to be in a position where we can pay somebody's rent so that they're able to do that and survive, because it's so important to make sure that musicians can survive.
Oh my gosh. It's beyond survive, but
I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional about it, but it's just so true. I just want, and I know that like my bosses and everybody at the organization feels the same way. It's like, we just want to be in a position where we can help people on that level, not just like, I broke my arm and I can't play a gig. I want it to be like, please, like, let us support you in this, in whatever you need to heal and to feel better and to be able to keep making music, because it's so challenging. And it's going to be a challenging next couple of years too, because we're just not bouncing back from this, because the economy is in a really bad place and all that stuff. And as you know, so I just really appreciate you like letting us be a part of your podcast, because it's so important for people to know that they can help, and we can help anyone who's a music worker that wants to be helped, I guess.
Oh my gosh, Anna, thank you so much. I'm honest. Like I heard you were really great, but I didn't think it was going to be to this level. I'm just so honored to share this space with you and for you to be doing this work and this service from your heart so deeply. I am so excited for everyone listening to know that Unison is there, and I'm excited to see it grow. I know it's going to, and the services continue to expand. I'm putting that intention out into the universe, and I'm so excited for us to figure out ways that we can continue to collaborate and help. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been such an honor to speak to you. I was definitely nervous. I've been listening to your podcast and I'm like, wow, the guests that you have on, it's just incredible what you're doing. And I really look forward to us collaborating like as much as we possibly can. It's so amazing that we got to meet this way. And yeah, we'll be working together. I can't wait.
And that was that. Wow. Like I said, what an incredible conversation that we had. Once we stopped recording, we just got into so much more. And I really feel like we need to have her back on the show for round 2, another episode to even go deeper into what it really means to be a mother in industries that have you traveling, have you just, we really said it. It's anybody who is working full time while trying to parent and trying to live up to the expectations of a society that is and hasn't been super conscious for a long time. So for those of you that took something out of that, Unison Fund, we're going to link everything below so you can check out the resources that are available to you if you are a Canadian working musician. And we are definitely going to be doing some more collaborations with Unison Fund this year. So please do check out our Instagram page, go to our website, consciouseconomics.ca, and find out about upcoming programs that we are doing. We do lots of them, and you are always welcome. So thank you so much for tuning into this episode, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. Bye for now.